Imagine being forced to become the beloved wife of a serial killer. That's exactly the nightmare this girl finds herself trapped in. One moment, she's living a normal life, and the next, she's forced into marriage with a man who could end her life with ease, and with a smile on his face. Despite the danger, she has no choice but to endure it. But the big question is, can she turn this bloodthirsty killer who's like a ticking time bomb into a normal man, the kind women fall for at first sight? Will love play a significant role in their fake or rather, forced marriage? And what about the secret deal she made on his behalf? But before all that, how did it all begin? The story begins with our girl, Leeyeon, cutting down branches with a chainsaw in a mountainous region. With the task done, she wipes her forehead. Next is the final touch, applying a nutrient injection to the tree. Throughout the process, her face beams with joy. For some reason, she treats the trees like humans and even talks to them, clearly passionate about her work. But then, she wonders why the owner of this place doesn't take care of it, adding that they don't seem to care about plant life. She decides not to dwell on it and focuses on wrapping things up for tomorrow. On her way back, she reflects on her day. It was the same as always. Going to the hospital, reading overdue bills, checking on the trees, and finally, arguing with clients who refuse to pay on time. Just another ordinary day for her. Suddenly, an injured man begs for help, promising to spill everything. However, a hooded man standing over him coldly replies that it's already too late, and that the real fun is just about to begin. With that, he ends the man. Meanwhile, she watches in horror, frozen in place. Seeing the hooded man, she instantly realizes this is a murder scene. Now trembling, she frantically thinks about her next move. Reaching into her pocket, she tries to report to the police, but in her panic, she accidentally steps on a branch. The snap of the branch only worsens her fear. The hooded man pauses his actions. With a sigh, he mutters, wondering why this is happening, because now he has to deal with someone else who has witnessed him. This realization makes her so scared that she nearly feels her soul leaving her body. Her mind races with questions. Is this guy a serial killer? What should she do? Will he notice her? The hooded man, a dashing young guy in his 30s, suddenly turns in her direction. She freezes on the spot. An awkward and soul-sucking silence falls over them. Only the sound of crickets and insects echo in the cold night. Then, with a grin, the hooded man finally speaks. Aren't you supposed to run now? His words snap her back to reality. Without a second thought, she bolts off, dropping everything except her phone. However, the man lets out a mocking laugh at her desperate escape attempt. While running, she dials the police, frantically explaining the situation. They try to calm her down and ask for her name. Shouting, she exclaims, her name is so Leeyeon, and she's about to die. The officers assure her that help is on the way but warn her that, if this turns out to be a false report, she faces consequences. She doesn't care, she just tells them to hurry. Then, to her horror, she suddenly feels a thin thread tightening around her neck. Momentarily stunned, she accidentally drops her phone. The hooded man is holding the thread, tightening it further. With an eerie smile, he hands her the chainsaw she left behind. You might want to hold on to this, he taunts, pulling the thread even tighter. At that moment, only one thought fills her mind: is this really how she's going to die? She remembers her wish to live a normal, quiet life. She was so close to achieving it. Will she really die here? But her survival instincts kicks in and went on overdrive. With adrenaline surging through her veins, she grabs the chainsaw and swings it at the hooded man's face. Blood splatters as he lets go, staggering back. Now, she can finally see his face up close. For a moment, time seems to freeze. Their eyes lock. He can see the desperate will to live burning in her gaze. But then something else happens. The man who was supposed to be dead suddenly stands up and violently knocks the hooded man from behind. Apparently, he wasn't dead after all. She stands there, utterly in shock. This scene, it's like something straight out of an action or horror movie. The hooded man, now unmasked, curses under his breath before losing consciousness. His body tumbles down the cliffside. She watches in disbelief, still processing everything. Meanwhile, the injured man takes the opportunity to escape, having somehow survived death. She narrates, explaining that after that night, the hooded man became her patient, and he has been in a coma for the past 2 years. The scene shifts to the present day. She's dealing with another client, just part of her daily routine. This time, the client is the principal of a school, who looks confused and asks for clarification. She calmly explains that the trees are suffering from constipation. They can't properly pass nutrients through their system, adding with confidence, bowel movement is important for all living things. But the principal still doesn't get it. When she explains further, he notices the curious stares of the children around him. Embarrassed, he quickly clears his throat and adjusts his tone. Addressing her as doctor, he emphasizes the importance of these trees as a school symbol. She reassures him that the issue isn't serious. It's simply that the trees can't digest nutrients properly. However, while he looks worried on the outside, inwardly, he mocks her. Completely ignoring her explanation, he schemes to make her fix the trees, only to damage them afterward and demand refunds and compensation. A cruel plan, but a profitable one. He chuckles to himself. But then Leeyeon suddenly calls for his attention. With a sharp gaze, she asks if he intentionally placed something on these trees. The principal keeps up his act, feigning confusion, asked what she meant. She shocks him by bringing up the recent news about the school's expansion. She continues, making him more anxious, mentioning how building materials may have mixed with the soil. When these materials come into contact with water, they harden like stone, preventing the trees from absorbing moisture. The principal, still acting, asks what she's implying. She bluntly states that he's trying to steal money avoiding waste management costs by illegally dumping materials into the soil. Now serious, she warns him that she report this to City Hall, meaning he'll have to pay double the cost. Leaving him bewildered, she announces her departure. The principal, now panicked, pleads with her to wait, insisting that it's all a misunderstanding. She stops, as if remembering something. Mentally calculating, she realizes if she heads straight to the clinic, she'll only be met with complaints. With that, she makes a full 360-degree turn. Next, she proudly explains her profession, declaring that she's the best in her field. With a radiant smile, she hands him her business card. If he needs help, call our clinic, the Spruce Tree Clinic, she says before leaving. Riding her bike back to the clinic, she reflects on how people treat her, assuming she's just a weak woman. But she's already dealt with all sorts of men in her line of work. Then, she notices an incoming call. Answering, the person on the other end, addressing her as director, reports an urgent matter. If she doesn't arrive in 5 minutes, we're opening the second floor door, they warn. This nearly makes her stumble on the road, demanding a reason. She listens as the caller, an older woman, explains that strange sounds are coming from inside the room. But Leeyeon finds this odd. How could there be strange sounds coming from an empty room? The woman, apologetic, admits that she already called a locksmith to open the door. Leeyeon's eyes widen, ordering them to stop immediately. Telling the department head to wait, she assures her that she'd be there in 5 minutes, and they shouldn't open the door. Meanwhile, the locksmith asks if they should proceed. The department head hesitates, then gives the order open it. But there's a very specific reason why this door must never be opened. Because inside lies the hooded man, still in a coma, and in a vegetative state for the past 2 years. Leeyeon finally arrived. She rushed into the clinic, calling for her head of department. Meanwhile, the locksmith was already in the process of dismantling the door handle when Leeyeon stormed in like a hurricane, instructing them to wait. This made her head of department, Chuya, sigh in frustration. Quickly, Leeyeon dismissed the locksmith, promising to pay extra for the repair costs. Then, turning to Chuya, she angrily demanded an explanation for her actions, emphasizing that the second floor room belonged to someone else. However, Chuya fired back, saying that Leeyeon always made different excuses. Pointing out that they had been work partners for a long time, Chuya insisted that Leeyeon should trust her with anything. Leeyeon sighed inwardly before explaining that the room was empty, so there was no point in opening it. But Chuya countered, saying that she should at least be allowed to breathe the air of the room. Leeyeon immediately rejected the idea, stating that the room wasn't ventilated. However, inwardly, she knew that if Chuya got inside, her life would be over. Chuya, of course, already suspected she was lying. Well, Leeyeon's reason was tied to one man, Kwon Ji-seok. A flashback to the past began. At first, she didn't understand what was happening. She saw a strange man in a suit, slowly taking a cigarette. As she tried to piece things together, the last thing she remembered was the serial killer falling off the cliff in the mountains. But her train of thought was interrupted when she noticed her surroundings. She saw people chopping meat, all wearing protective gear. Her heart pounded as she realized she was tied up inside what appeared to be a butchering house. Trembling in desperation, she tried to make sense of the situation. Then, Kwon Ji-seok spoke. He asked why she did it. She was confused at first. Then, the strange man explained that the man she had almost killed was his younger brother. The realization that these two were related sent shockwaves through her. She immediately thought that both siblings were insane. With a shaking voice, Leeyeon tried to explain that it was a misunderstanding. She had only defended herself. She wasn't the one responsible for his brother's condition. She didn't forget to mention that his brother had nearly killed her and was about to bury someone alive. However, Kwon Ji-seok, taking a drag from his cigarette, dismissed that as unimportant. His remark made her freeze momentarily. Then, he nonchalantly stated that he was only upset because his fun had been ruined. Mentally, Leeyeon confirmed that this man completely lacked common sense. Still, she tried again, explaining that she had only been at the mountain to do her job. But Kwon Ji-seok looked indifferent. She clarified further she wasn't the one who had nearly killed his brother. It was actually the injured man who had been buried that had struck him from behind with a stone. Meanwhile, Kwon Ji-seok casually checked the time. And just like that, Leeyeon felt things taking a turn for the worse. Desperately, she pleaded with him to believe her. She had only defended herself with a chainsaw, no less. But Kwon Ji-seok revealed something chilling. His younger brother had an extremely sharp sense of hearing. So, it was highly unlikely that he wouldn't have heard someone sneaking up behind him. As he extinguished his cigarette, Leeyeon's mind raced, trying to think of her next move. Suddenly, Kwon Ji-seok closed the distance between them. He explained that he didn't care about what had happened. The details were meaningless to him, and making her the one responsible for the crime would be easier than lighting a cigarette. All he wanted was for someone to pay the price. She was the last person to see his brother before he ended up in a vegetative state. Leeyeon's blood ran cold. The hooded man, the serial killer, was in a vegetative state. With that realization, she knew her chances of survival had just dropped to zero. There was no way she was making it out of this alive. Just then, Kwon Ji-seok made her an offer. If she accepted, he wouldn't trouble her anymore. He would make everything disappear. She hesitated but was curious about the offer. Kwon Ji-seok smirked, glad that he was dealing with a smart woman. With that, he placed a contract on the prepared table. Next, her restraints were removed. She groaned in pain as she moved. Then, Kwon Ji-seok explained he would find the injured man the real culprit and make him take her place. In exchange, she had to take care of his little brother and make sure he never left Hwaedong. Leeyeon was terrified. The aura of this man was overwhelming. But even more terrifying was the bizarre deal itself. Still, she had no choice. She had to make this happen at all costs. Now, after 2 years, inside the second-floor room, she watched over Kwon Ji-seok's younger brother. The only information she had on him after all this time was his name, Kwon Chae-woo. She explained that after the incident, everything had been cleaned up. She had to pay a fine for filing a false report, and the second floor of the building was constructed in the blink of an eye after she signed the contract. A special medical team had been assigned to take care of him. But the most frightening thing wasn't any of that. It was dealing with Kwon Ji-seok's wealth and power. His words about easily making her the culprit still haunted her. So, until the real culprit was caught, she had no choice but to take care of Kwon Chae-woo. And so, every day for the past 2 years, she had prayed for him not to wake up, because all she wanted was to live a quiet, peaceful life. But fate had other plans. Kwon Chae-woo's finger twitched slightly. The next morning, Leeyeon's head of department, Chuya, called for her attention. She excitedly showed Leeyeon a photo of the sole heir of a landscaping company and eagerly asked for her opinion. But Leeyeon, unlike Chuya, wasn't the least bit enthusiastic. Teasingly, she asked if Chuya was interested in someone old enough to be her grandson, but Chuya quickly clarified it was for Leeyeon. Leeyeon was confused, and Chuya explained that the man was coming to Korea for a marriage meeting, which was a great opportunity. But Leeyeon remained clueless and oblivious. That's when Chuya asked if she had forgotten how business had been lately or if she needed a reminder. They had lost all their major contracts to a new clinic, and now all they did was handle gardening and community center work. Leeyeon reflected on her words. The new clinic, Dongseo Clinic, had made a grand entrance with its fancy building. Not only that, but they were experts in deals and had secured most of the major contracts in Hwaedong. She almost recalled something important when suddenly Chuya snapped her out of it. Chuya then declared that they needed to take back what rightfully belonged to them. When Leeyeon asked what she meant, Chuya gestured toward the heir of the landscaping company, revealing that she had already gotten his contact information in advance. But Leeyeon immediately shut down the idea, stating that she wasn't desperate and definitely not a gold digger. Chuya was left in shock. She scolded Leeyeon for speaking nonsense. Now standing close, she explained that Leeyeon shouldn't even consider herself a gold digger because she deeply lacked the qualifications. All she had to do was make a simple good impression and gain some favor. Leeyeon was flustered, When she asked how Chuya got his number, Chuya casually revealed that it was from their chairman, leaving Leeyeon even more surprised. Chuya wondered why Leeyeon was so shocked. She had known the guy for a long time. She continued, telling Leeyeon to listen carefully. A good spouse isn't found by fate, it's chosen with foresight. Wanting to continue her life lesson about love and relationship, Chuya was abruptly cut off as Leeyeon quickly made her escape, leaving in a hurry. Chuya was furious. She couldn't help but wonder if Leeyeon planned to stay single forever. Meanwhile, Leeyeon reflected on how the idea of a spouse felt like poison to her. All she wanted was a quiet life, just tending to plants, nothing more. Though, keeping a serial killer in her house probably didn't count as nothing happening, she mused. But she had already gotten used to it, at least after the first year. Night fell. Looking at the clock, Leeyeon realized it was late. Time for her nightly prayer routine. As she made her way to the second floor, she was prepared to pray, once again, for Kwon Chae-woo to remain unconscious. But the sight that greeted her made her eyes widen in shock. The guy was missing. The room was eerily quiet. Realizing that he was gone, she became petrified, like her soul had just left her body. Kwon Ji-seok's words echoed in her mind. Immediately, she decided that no matter what, she had to find him. However, Kwon Chae-woo was already in the room, cloaked in the darkness. She hadn't even noticed him. By the time she did, it was too late. The only thought that came to mind was if she going to die. Kwon Chae-woo easily pinned both of her hands down. Leeyeon was in disbelief. How was this even possible? His muscles should have been weak. He had been comatose for 2 years. Where was this strength coming from? As they remained in this awkward position, she desperately began pleading for him to let go. But sensing no reaction from him, panic started to set in. Trying to calm herself, she muttered his name in a trembling voice. She assured him that he had just woken up and must be confused. She promised to explain everything. She even told him he needed to see a doctor. But before she could say more, Kwon Chae-woo silenced her. Now, clearly frightened, Leeyeon worried about how this was developing. Then, he spoke. He asked if she was the one who had locked him up. She froze. Or had he locked her up? Leeyeon quickly rejected the idea, mentally noting that Kwon Chae-woo must be some kind of lunatic to ask such a thing. She tried reassuring him, stating that he was her patient and had been asleep for 2 years. She pleaded for him to calm down. Finally, he released his grip. But now, he stared her down with his cold, lifeless eyes. Leeyeon shivered. Something about his gaze unsettled her. It was the stare of a beast, completely devoid of emotions. Then, suddenly, he spoke again. He asked if Kwon Chae-woo was really his given name. Her fear shifted into confusion. And then, he asked if she was someone important to him. When she didn't respond, he suddenly grabbed a syringe and thrust it toward her neck, stopping just before making contact. Now, he asked her once more, "Are you someone important to me?" And in that instant, Leeyeon realized he had lost his memories. Realizing that he doesn't remember anything, Leeyeon thinks she can find a way to stay safe from him. She suddenly grabs his hand. With a determined look, Leeyeon states that saying such things hurts her feelings, adding that she is obviously important to him. Both of them share a close connection and have met in more intimate ways. However, this is the best her brain cells could muster at this point. Kwon Chae-woo, however, grabs her by the chin, asking why she was shaking like a leaf if they were so close. He throws her into confusion. Now, he questions whether she lost a finger or if she's here to do inappropriate things with him. At this, she becomes even more convinced that the guy is clearly messed up. Just then, Kwon Chae-woo asks why he only remembers trashy words, but Leeyeon tries to explain, focusing on the main subject. She emphasizes how close they were and insists that he is a very kind person, so kind that he even helped her put on a necklace. Though, to be fair, that was the very same string that almost killed her. She continues her brainwashing, stating how careful he is toward her, never forcing anything or doing anything bad to her, but deep down, she knows this is just wishful thinking. Now serious, Kwon Chae-woo asks why he shouldn't do something bad to her. She struggles to answer, noticing his hand reaching for her neck. Immediately, she exclaims, "It's illegal, mandated by law." He presses further for an answer, and she scrambles to come up with the best excuse. Suddenly, she remembers Chuya's words about spouses. With this in mind, she quickly explains that if he does anything to her, it will count as the murder of kin. Holding his hand, she thinks this is her best move, at least enough to restrain him for now. Bluntly, she tells him, "I'm your wife." Kwon Chae-woo freezes, petrified for a moment. Suddenly, he gets a sharp headache, his body tensing up before he abruptly loses consciousness. Leeyeon screams so loud it could wake the neighbors. And just like that, something unexpected begins to unfold. The next morning, Leeyeon, still in shock, questions whether the tree was actually struck by lightning. The weeping lady confirms it. She explains that the tree was planted after her son's birth, and now that he has joined the military, she worries that this might be a bad omen. When Leeyeon inspects the tree, she finds that its roots are not damaged, which is a relief. It can still recover. However, she hesitates, wondering if they should take the job. She points out that if anything goes wrong, they might get blamed. But Leeyeon immediately rejects that idea, emphasizing the tree's significance to the lady. Before they can proceed with the treatment, Leeyeon notices her phone ringing. She quickly excuses herself to take the call, her tired eyes hinting at the rough night she had. She asks the doctor loudly why he does know when will Kwon Che will wake up. She had clearly had a conversation with him last night before losing consciousness. The doctor, however, responds differently than expected. He clarifies that's not what he meant. It's been a month since Kwon Che lost consciousness. After his comatose state, the doctor has been monitoring him for a week, and his recovery is unimaginable. However, he seems to have developed a rare symptom. Leeyeon freezes. What kind of symptom? She asked in a confused tone. The doctor reveals it hypersomnia. For a moment, she stands still, bewildered. He explains that it's a case similar to Sleeping Beauty syndrome, though they don't know the exact cause. Apart from memory loss, no brain abnormalities have been found. So, they plan to keep monitoring him for any changes. He adds that once a patient with hypersomnia falls asleep, their sleep time can increase for days. Now, it's already day 12, and Kwon Che still hasn't woken up. The doctor asks if they should transfer him back to Leeyeon's house, but she immediately tells him to take a chill pill. She then tried to clear things up. She asked if what the doctor was saying meant that Kwon Che was no longer in a vegetative state, but due to his symptoms, no one knew when he would wake up. When the doctor confirms, she beams with joy. Finally, some good news for her. The doctor, however, is a bit confused as she thanks him profusely before hanging up. Apologizing for keeping her head of department and the weeping lady waiting, she confidently agrees to do her best to save the tree, assuring the lady not to worry. This leaves Chuya puzzled. On the other side, the doctor sighs, thinking she must be under a lot of pressure based on how she acted. Suddenly, he remembers something. He totally forgot to mention Niki's symptom of hypersomnia behavioral abnormalities, but he decides not to dwell on it since no one knows when Kwon Che will wake up. He figures he'll tell her in time. Still, the doctor can't help but wonder why doesn't Kwon Che's brother take full responsibility for his treatment. Why does he always send him back to Leeyeon? Dismissing the thought as irrelevant after all, he's not getting paid to dig into it. He shrugs it off. However, something else lingers in his mind. The words Kwon Che kept repeating in his sleep. A scene flashes back to the doctor sitting beside him. When he asked him to say something, the words that came out of Kwon Che's mouth stunned him. Please don't wake up. Late at night at Leeyeon's house, humming a sweet tune, Leeyeon feels unusually happy. Ever since the incident, she's been stuck with Kwon Che, and for the first time in a while, she feels like she can finally fix the lie she told earlier about being his wife, something she deeply regrets and can't get out of her head. But now, he's unconscious, and no one knows when he'll wake up. This is her chance to set things right. She opens the door to his room, remembering that the doctor said he would be brought in that afternoon. However, the moment she steps inside, she freezes. The bed is empty. It takes her a moment to process what's happening before she snaps out of it, cursing under her breath. That bastard, she hisses. Out in the cold night, Leeyeon frantically runs around the area, calling out for Kwon Che. After running for a while, she stops to catch her breath. He's still a patient. He shouldn't have gone far, so why can't she find him? Desperate, she tries to think of a way to track him down. Then something catches her attention. Blood. Traces of blood stain the ground. Her mind goes blank, unable to process what she's seeing. Following the trail, her eyes widen as she finally spots Kwon Che. He's standing there, holding a bloody chicken in his hand. His clothes and face are smeared with the poor creature's blood as he stares back at her. She's found him, but now, she hesitates. Taking a deep breath, she tries to collect herself, mentally repeating that she needs to stay calm. Finally, she asked, why is he outside in his condition and what's with the chicken? But Kwon Che remains silent, completely unfazed by her questions. A sudden wave of anxiety washes over her. Then, to her horror, he spits something out, blood. Leeyeon's face drains of color as she realizes it belongs to the chicken. Did he rip it apart with his teeth? She ponders. Before she can fully grasp the situation, he suddenly speaks, asking where the hell she have been. The first thing that came to his mind after waking up was her, but the door was locked. Leeyeon is petrified. Not only did he easily break a locked door, but more importantly he remembers her. Now, her chances of fixing the lie are slim. Still, she forces herself to stay calm. He's unstable, but she still has the upper hand. With a nervous but reassuring smile, she says, he must be really confused. She's a doctor, well, an herbalist, really. But she have been taking care of him. He have been asleep for a long time, and he's sick. That's why all of this is happening. It's just a side effect. Don't worry, once he is better, everything that happened tonight will feel like a dream. She ends with a bright smile, suggesting they go home. Surprisingly, he remains silent, seeming to process her words. Then, he suddenly drops the lifeless chicken. You're right, he mutters. If this were real, he wouldn't be standing in the middle of nowhere making a mess. His remark puzzles her. Then, he takes a step closer, his expression unreadable. If this were all fake, he continues, he would be spending his time sleeping with her. Leeyeon stiffens. He's not confused at all. Everything is clear to me, he says. He has a wife. And that wife is trying to abandon him like she has some kind of death wish. A shiver runs down Leeyeon's spine. He's right. The lie that was supposed to save her has finally caught up with her. And now, she's too scared to move. Suddenly, Kwon Chae-woo speaks again, asking for her name. Leeyeon blinks, stunned. When she doesn't answer immediately, he asks again. She hesitates. Should she tell him her real name? But then, his gaze darkens. Hyun asks a third time, he warns. Panicked, she blurts out her name. Seemingly satisfied, he takes a moment to memorize it before asking a question that leaves her speechless. Did she think he is a burden and that now was the best time to abandon me? She immediately rejects his claim. Now standing dangerously close to her, he demands an explanation. Flustered, she tries to justify her actions, explaining that it wouldn't make sense for him to have a wife he doesn't even remember. She was just trying to keep things from becoming more unsettling. It seems to convince him at least a little, while she mentally pleads for her survival. Or so she thought. Nonsense, he scoffs. What kind of logic is that? He asked, adding she don't even try it. His eyes darken further. The law says they're married. So why is she so desperate to get rid of him? Seeing her trembling to the core, he exhales sharply, seemingly restraining himself. Well, it must be true then, he mutters. They're really married. He pauses before adding, he felt strange the moment she tried to abandon me. Leeyeon mentally curses, thinking to herself that he's a total ass to begin with. He must have loved her deeply before losing his memory. She frowns, fully realizing that she's completely trapped in this mess now. But then, she remembers something. Kwon Chae-woo may be strong, but he has one weakness: he doesn't remember anything. She can use that. Forcing a smile, she chirps for them to go home and tend to his injuries. But Kwon Chae-woo tilts his head slightly and smirks. Home, he repeats. Then, his expression turns dangerous. You mean our newlywed home? Leeyeon's stomach drops. Nervously, she decides to play along. They finally arrived home, and Leeyeon was exhausted. When Kwon Chae-woo asked if she was okay, she remained silent but inwardly blamed him for constantly questioning her on their way back. Feeling a bit guilty, he suggested he should have walked, but she immediately pointed out that he was injured. Also, if anything happened to him, she would be the one responsible, she notes inwardly. Then, she nicely told him to head upstairs and clean up, adding that she would bring the first aid kit. Her gesture made his heart skip a beat. While upstairs, she gently tended to his wounds, realizing he must be in pain, but still, he showed no sympathy. Suddenly, their eyes met. She immediately looked away and quickly avoided his gaze. Leeyeon wondered why he was staring at her, but she decided to finish quickly and leave as soon as possible. She announced she was done and instructed Kwon Chae-woo to rest, saying proper treatment would be done tomorrow. She was about to head downstairs when he shocked her by asking why. Pointing out that they were married, he questioned why they should sleep separately. She definitely didn't expect that. She tried to remind him that he was still sick and needed rest, but he quickly replied that he was no longer in a vegetative state. Leaning in close, he made her flustered, realizing she hadn't thought this far ahead. Kwon Chae-woo noticed her tense expression. Then, he asked if the reason was that he seemed different and was a complete stranger to her. She was a bit surprised and tried to say something, but he immediately cut her off, remarking that he wouldn't force her into anything or treat her carelessly, promising to be the man she once remembered. Somehow, she ended up in bed, lying next to a serial killer. Her mind went blank as he remarked that he had a lot of questions for her. It seemed the ones he asked on their way home weren't enough. When she gave the green light, Kwon Chae-woo asked how he ended up in a vegetative state. She explained that during their trip to the mountains, they had an accident. He was surprised that nothing happened to her, so his next question was when did they get married. She lied, saying it had been 2 years. Then, he sighed, remarking that he had been making her suffer throughout their honeymoon. Yeah, his situation sucked. The questioning continued, and each time, she had to rack her brain for a believable excuse or lie. When she revealed they got engaged after they met something straight out Frozen, he was a bit surprised. Well, she figured saying they got married right after meeting would be too strange, but she tried to say something. Then, Kwon Chae-woo completely shocked her by asking about their first night together. He pressed further, wondering if they did that the first time they met and felt an instant connection. Leeyeon was petrified. Seeing her reaction, he assumed it must have been amazing and that it was a shame he had forgotten about it, thinking that she must have been really bold to make such a move, but she immediately rejected the claim. Playfully teasing, he asked if he was the one who managed to sweet-talk her into bed. Wondering if he was that shameless back then, her brain short-circuited. For a moment, she went completely blank. Having no way out, she agreed, but she had to end this conversation now. So, she explained that it wasn't how he thought. In fact, they didn't have good chemistry in bed. This suddenly made him curious. Now, he was way too interested. Then, he asked the ultimate question, who wasn't good enough. Leeyeon was shocked. She shyly explained that they were both clumsy their first time. Suddenly, his aura turned ominous. He muttered that this was worse than losing his memory. Now, he wanted details. Leeyeon started sweating bullets. Desperate, she needed to say something, anything. Using all 32 years of inexperience, she dropped the ultimate confidence breaker. She told him that he was small and not the right size, and that she never felt anything. At least she didn't compare it to something worse. During their time together, she never climaxed. Leeyeon quickly added that despite all that, he wasn't always up for it, and she loved that about him. Especially when he went into monk mode. Kwon Chae-woo was in disbelief. But what choice did he have? His wife said it, so it must be true, right? With her Oscar-worthy performance done, an awkward silence filled the room. Kwon Chae-woo let out a deep sigh, looking absolutely defeated. Then, he muttered that he wouldn't be able to satisfy her needs. Feeling victorious, she told him to sleep, and he agreed. After a while, noticing he had gone silent, she figured he must have fallen asleep. With that, she began praying, hoping Kwon Chae-woo would fall into a deep sleep and not wake up for a week. But, her moment of relief was ruined. Suddenly, he asked one final question. Stumbling over his words, he hesitantly asked, was it that he missed or just lacked experience? She froze. Then, she awkwardly explained that she wasn't entirely sure. But, he didn't last long in the fight. Well, she had officially shattered his confidence. Kwon Chae-woo remained frozen in shock, a bit furious at himself for even asking. Meanwhile, Leeyeon continued her silent prayer, hoping that he would finally fall asleep. For a week, in the morning, sunlight slowly enters the room through the window. Leeyeon gradually opens her eyes. Guess who was just watching her sleep? Kwon Chae-woo. In an intimate tone, he asks if she slept well. For a moment, an eerie silence fills the room. Coming to her senses, Leeyeon jolts out of bed, screaming in horror. He expresses concern as she wakes up, confused about why he's awake. She expected him to be sleeping due to his illness, but here he is wide awake. After some time, the doctor arrives, apologizing for hastily diagnosing Kwon Chae-woo. He explains that Chae-woo could fall into a deep sleep at any time, even tomorrow, and they need more time to understand his sleeping pattern. Standing in the corner of the room, Leeyeon realizes this means he could also wake up the next day. The doctor suspects the reason might be a change in environment or something that subconsciously triggered him. He asks if anything unusual happened, but Kwon Chae-woo looks puzzled. Then, Chae-woo casually mentions that he slept with Leeyeon, which the doctor immediately notes down. The doctor pauses for a moment, clearly surprised to realize that the woman standing in the corner is Kwon Chae-woo's wife. Then, the doctor bluntly asks if they had sex, causing Leeyeon to shake her head frantically. Taking this into account, the doctor exclaims that they need to try a different approach. From now on, both of them need to sleep together until he finds a solution, causing Leeyeon to freeze, wondering how things went south so quickly. Later, in the living room, Leeyeon sits on the couch with a live broadcast playing. However, she's distracted, thinking about how sharing a bed with a serial killer is mentally exhausting. Her pressing concern is what she tells Chuya if she keeps heading upstairs every night. She runs through several excuses in her head and tries to introduce Kwon Chae-woo properly, but none of them seem convincing. She sighs in defeat, knowing there's no way to fool someone like Chuya, but dealing with this alone is exhausting, and she can't imagine dragging Chuya into her problems. Suddenly, an announcement from the live news broadcast catches her attention. They talk about recent fraud cases and how scammers isolate their victims to control their choices. They advise anyone who receives a suspicious call or message to report it to the police or tell someone they trust. Somehow, this announcement resonates with Leeyeon. She decides to come clean and tell Chuya the truth. After being fully briefed, Chuya questions whether it's true that Leeyeon is the wife of a serial killer. With a pitiful expression, Leeyeon agrees, admitting it's all true. This prompts Chuya to scold her like a mother reprimanding a child for misbehaving in public. Leeyeon tries to explain that she needed a logical excuse for why she was with him in the first place, pointing out that he almost killed her, and only when she acted as his wife did he spare her. But Chuya calls her a fool, noting that by doing so, she's let herself get romantically entangled with him. Chuya then informs Leeyeon that she wants no part in this mess, but Leeyeon pleads with her to play along and treat her like a married woman for now. Chuya sighs but agrees, asking where Kwon Chae-woo is. Leeyeon explains that he'll be back from the hospital soon, but at that very moment, Kwon Chae-woo calls out Leeyeon's name. For the first time, he casually comes downstairs from his room. Seeing his handsome face up close, Leeyeon quietly whispers, pleading with Chuya to play along but to be careful, he's dangerous. However, Chuya is fully engrossed in her role and addresses Kwon Chae-woo as son-in-law, her eyes sparkling, leaving Leeyeon in shock. Time passes, and Kwon Chae-woo decides that his wife is a botanist, a tree doctor. Curious, he asks what he usually does for a living. Leeyeon nervously explains that he usually helps her plant flowers, while Chuya just stares at her. Meanwhile, Chuya's mind races with different thoughts. She wonders how someone with such an angelic face could be a serial killer. Then, Kwon Chae-woo, addressing Chuya as mother-in-law, politely requests Leeyeon to sit next to him. Seeing them remain silent, he wonders what's going on. Quickly, Leeyeon rushes over to his side. Clearly, both women have very different perspectives on this situation. Leeyeon then clarifies that Chuya isn't her mother but someone who works with her, and she only called him son-in-law out of politeness. Kwon Chae-woo realizes that Chuya is someone important to Leeyeon and decides to make a good impression. He quickly turns to Chuya and apologizes for intruding on their conversation, promising to be well-mannered as Leeyeon has asked him to be. Though it might take time to be the husband she remembers, he's ready to try. Leeyeon tries to reassure him not to push himself, warning he could hurt himself in the process. Suddenly, he cuts her off, leaving her stunned. He instructs her to call him by his first name, Chae-woo, and stop being so formal. The only thing he has in his mind is Leeyeon's face, the face of a woman he doesn't even remember. He expresses concern, not knowing what will happen if he forgets her face, noting that all he wants is to be a good husband, not a bad one. However, as Leeyeon feels the warmth of his hand, she wonders why her heart is pounding. Chuya, watching them, notices Leeyeon's flushed face and realizes something unusual is going on. Cross-legged on the couch, she looks at her phone and decides she needs to uncover the true identity of Kwon Chae-woo. The scene shifts to nighttime. Leeyeon lay face first on the bed, thinking about how long and exhausting the day had been. She had spent the entire day prying Kwon Chae-woo off, wondering if this would be her life if he kept waking up. She recalled what the doctor had said about them sleeping together. Now, considering it, she questioned why she should follow the doctor's orders. Her agreement was to keep Kwon Chae-woo until the culprit was caught, not to give her life away. She wasn't sure if he could sleep on his own, which was a real problem. When she tried to lock the second floor, he had easily smashed through it. Peeking into the room, her eyes widened in shock. He was casually getting stronger, doing push-ups. She watched in disbelief, wondering where this strength was coming from. Another problem was that, though he looked harmless, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was the person who had buried someone with a smile on his face. Just the thought of calling him her husband scared her, and she just wanted him to fall asleep. As she tried to go to sleep, she prayed he wouldn't come. However, she became frightened as she sensed his ominous presence. Kwon Chae-woo knocked and called for her, requesting that she open the door. She remained motionless, obviously scared, pleading inwardly for him to go away. Seeing no response, he decided to leave. Hearing the silence, she guessed he had finally left. To confirm, she leaned closer to the door to listen. Suddenly, he spoke, asking Leeyeon if she really thought he was gone, making her jump back from the door in fright. Then he asked her to come closer, adding that he could sense her even from far away. She was utterly confused by his remark. He continued, stating that she smelled like wet grass and she didn't even know it. Now, she wondered if Kwon Chae-woo was some kind of animal. Her thoughts were interrupted by a loud noise from the door. Kwon Chae-woo expressed frustration, noting that when she wasn't around, he had no sense of himself. Questioning his current state, he wondered if he could even consider himself human. It was as if he was about to lose his mind. He urged her to tell him something about his past and didn't care if he sounded shameless or pathetic. He just wanted to know if he truly existed. However, Leeyeon noticed something strange. He had torn down every door in the house, but for some reason, he was unable to open hers. She knew the things about him being kind and caring were lies, but was there really something holding him back? She couldn't help but feel a bit strange. Then she called out to him, explaining that she couldn't come now because she wasn't wearing any clothes. She also noted that it wasn't the best time to reminisce about the past. The room fell quiet once more before he agreed to leave, surprising her. However, his little remark after hearing she was without clothes caught her off guard. Meanwhile, she was even more surprised when he informed her that he'd be heading upstairs to clean up. She wondered if she had really managed to control him. As he left, he told her to take good care of herself, making her wonder if he was going far away, judging by his tone. However, after a whole day of dealing with him, she still didn't manage to get a good night's sleep. The following morning, Chuya watched him, commenting and praising his good looks while Leeyeon pleaded with her not to disturb him. But Chuya questioned her sincerity. Curious, Chuya asked if Leeyeon had seen him undress, shocking her with the question. Quickly, she pushed Chuya out of the room, telling her to go downstairs before she accidentally woke him up. However, Leeyeon couldn't help but recall the events of that night. Ever since then, Kwon Chae-woo had slept for a week. While heading downstairs, she reflected on his last words telling her to take good care of herself, wondering if he had known this would happen. But her thoughts were interrupted by Chuya calling for her. Leeyeon finally felt excited, thinking she could now go back to her peaceful life. Or so she thought.